Hello! So in this unit, we're going to actually start getting into doing philosophy. And in this unit and the next several, we're going to be talking about God. So when you think of God, many of you, not all of you, will think of this. You'll think of Jesus Christ. Or you might think of this being. This is God creating Adam from the Sistine Chapel in Rome. But in other religions besides Christianity, we actually don't have many pictures of God. So this is the Torah from Judaism, the sort of key holy text, not the only one, but probably the most important one. And there are not many depictions, many pictures of God in Judaism, because there's this sort of second commandment worry about creating graven images and idolatry. And in other religions as well. So this is the Second Temple of Judaism. So lots of sort of big religious art, but no pictures, right? In Islam, there are few physical depiction, few pictures of God or of Muhammad. There's some controversy about whether or not that it's Islam. In some versions of Islam, it's not okay to create pictures of the Prophet Muhammad, but in others it is. But in any case, this is the Arabic for the word Allah, which is the Arabic word for God. And it's a very common depiction of God in Islam, or representation of God in Islam. And so, for example, here we have this character written out with a bunch of other characters. This means Allah, glory to the glorified one. This is the Sanskrit character Om. Sanskrit is an ancient language of India. And so we have all these different ways of representing God, some with pictures, some with words or symbols. What is this being? Is there such a being? Is it the same concept of God in these different religions or not? Well, here is a concept of God. God is perfect and infinite. God is all-knowing. So sometimes we say omniscient. God is all-powerful, so God is omnipotent. God is purely good. And God created the universe and sustains the universe. And we might add to this concept that God is providential and loving, meaning that God is involved in our lives in a positive way, maybe has a plan for us. But in any case, those first five, God is perfect and infinite, all-knowing and omniscient, all-powerful, purely good, and created the universe, that's a fairly widespread idea of a being that people use the word God for. And you find that idea in Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and many other religions. It's not the only idea that you find of God in those religions. So, for example, at some points in the Old Testament or the Torah, God is represented as being very jealous, and you wouldn't think that a perfect, infinite, purely good, all-knowing, all-powerful being that created the universe would be jealous. And so that's a different picture, maybe conception of God. And teasing that conception of God out from the text is actually not a trivial matter. But so there are other concepts of God, but this is the one that we're going to be working with when we are going to be discussing God, the idea of this perfect, infinite creator of the universe. So there it is, perfect and infinite, all-knowing, all-powerful, purely good, created the universe. And we're going to ask over the next several sessions, does such a being exist? Do we have reason to think such a being does exist? Do we have reason to think such a being does not exist? So there's a little bit of terminology around this. We want to ask, how certain are you that God exists? And now by God, we mean this idea I've just introduced of this perfect, infinite being. Well, so one word we have is the word theism, and that means that's the belief that God exists. That's from Greek, the word theo or theos. And monotheism, so mono meaning one, there's only one God, and that's certainly part of this picture of God that I've been talking about. And then there's atheism at the other, opposed to theism, which holds that God does not exist, and that a prefix on the front of the theism means without or not, so not a belief in God. Then in the middle, there's agnosticism, which says maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't exist, we don't know. And really, we should think of this as a spectrum, from certainty that God does not exist to certainty that God exists, with pure agnosticism falling right in the middle. So you might ask yourself, where do you fall? You've probably thought about this, and maybe you're agnostic, or maybe you're atheist, maybe you're theist. So we're going to be talking about, which of these do we have reason to believe? What are some reasons for believing that God exists? Well, here are a bunch. You might think, others' beliefs, other people believe in God. They tell me that God exists. And related to that, they might say it directly. I might hear them saying it, or I might encounter a holy text that some human wrote down at some point, perhaps a divinely inspired text. Maybe religion has positive feelings associated with, like, hope and joy, and has positive effects. Maybe religious people behave better. And some people have faith experiences that lead them to believe that they have in some way interacted with God. These are reasons of differing quality. So, as far as others' beliefs and the holy books go, we might ask, well, why should we trust these other people? Do they have reasons for their beliefs? And if so, let's ask what they are. And we might ask which believers should we trust? Why should we believe that these books are so authoritative and accurate? As far as the positive feelings and effects go, even supposing that religion does have these positive effects, lots of beliefs that give us happiness might be false. So the fact that and that have good effects when you have them, that doesn't mean they're true. It may be a pleasant, motivating illusion. And as far as faith experiences go, we can always ask, is the experience accurate? Maybe it was, we have all sorts of inaccurate experiences, and maybe the faith experiences are like that. Well, these are not decisive, but these are worries that one might raise about reasons for believing that God exists. What about reasons for believing that God doesn't exist? Well, you might think, science has shown us that God does not exist. Or you might think, actually, religion has lots of negative feelings and effects associated with it, maybe shame and guilt. There are lots of people, killing each other in the name of their religion. They've been doing that for centuries. And then there's a diversity of religions that appear to be different. And how would you just go about deciding which one to believe in? The fact that your parents have it? What makes them special? I mean, they're your parents, but so what? Why does that tell you anything about the accuracy of the religion? But on the other hand, I don't think that science tells us that God doesn't exist. I don't think that science really says, makes such a claim. Science provides all sorts of explanations about how things happen in the world, and when we didn't have those explanations, we might have thought God did that. But science doesn't actually anywhere assert God does not exist. It just doesn't talk about God. And in that way, it doesn't tell us that God doesn't exist, and it doesn't tell us that God does exist. Negative feelings and effects of religion? Well, again, just like happy beliefs can be false, unhappy beliefs can be true. Maybe these, shame and guilt are maybe appropriate. Maybe people who commit horrendous acts in the name of religion have some true beliefs, but are also very confused. And as far as the diversity of religions go, maybe we can figure out which one of them is correct. So there are lots of reasons for, lots of reasons against, and they all require sort of deeper exploration. It's not easy to just say, here's an answer. So we're going to be looking at more or less two arguments over the course of this module and the next two modules. We're going to look at something called the design argument, and summarized, boiled down to its essence, this says the world is good, and that means that God exists. That's an invalid argument, but okay, that's it boiled down to a nutshell. And that's what we'll look at in this module and the next. And then there's the so-called problem of evil, which says the world is not good, so God does not exist. And we'll be looking at that in the module after next. So we're going to be using this conception of God that I talked about, and we're going to be asking, does that being exist? And we're going to be looking in some detail at the design argument that says that God does exist, and the problem of evil, which says that God does not exist.